A Honda built before some of you were born is sitting in a garage in Minnesota right now with over 200,000 miles on the clock. The man who owns it doesn't think that's special. No rider does. It's a Honda. Of course, it still runs. Put a European bike of the same age next to it with half those miles, and watch the room change. That one's a survivor. That one gets a story told about it. Same age, half the miles. One's a miracle, and the other is just Tuesday. Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. That's not luck. It's not a fluke. Japan decided, on purpose, to build motorcycles that outlive every other brand on Earth. And the reason they pulled it off, while Harley and Ducati and BMW couldn't, comes down to a single decision made by an American that America laughed out of the room. By the time this is over, you're going to understand exactly how a broke man standing in a pile of ash in 1945 built the company that now sells more motorcycles than anyone on the planet. You're going to understand why the rest of the world still can't catch them. And you're going to understand why the engine in that Minnesota garage refuses to die. I'm Jimmy. Let me show you the whole thing. Start with the ash. 1945. A small factory in Hamamatsu, Japan, gets flattened, bombed, then finished off by an earthquake that ripped through the region. The owner made piston rings. He's 38 years old, he's broke, and he's standing in a country that's importing food to keep its own people alive. His name is Soichiro Honda. That man has nothing. No money, no building, no parts, no supply chain, no market. So what does he do? He buys a batch of tiny surplus engines, the little motors that powered military radio generators, and he bolts them onto bicycles. He sells them to people in a flattened country who can't afford a car, can't afford a real motorcycle, and just need to get from one place to another. That's the beginning. A bicycle with a war surplus engine strapped to it. That's the empire that now builds 16 million machines a year. Hold that picture, because we are coming back to it at the end. And it's going to mean something completely different by then. But here's the thing. That bike in the Minnesota garage doesn't run forever because Soichiro Honda was tough. Plenty of tough men built companies that are gone. It runs because of an idea. And here's the part that should make every American sit up. The idea was American. We invented it. We just threw it away. His name was W. Edwards Deming. Who was he? A statistician. That's it. Not a tycoon, not an engineer, not a celebrity. A quiet man who understood numbers. And for 20 years, this man tried to tell American factory bosses one single thing, over and over, and got ignored over and over. Here's what he said. When your product comes off the line broken, it is almost never the worker's fault. The real problem is the system that management built around that worker. Stop blaming the man with the wrench. Fix the system he's standing in, and quality stops being something you chase and beg for. It just happens. Every time. Simple. Almost obvious when you hear it now. And America wouldn't listen to a word of it. Why not? You have to understand the moment. It's the late 1940s. Every other industrial country on Earth is rubble. Germany, rubble. Japan, rubble. England, broke and exhausted. And America, untouched. Every factory standing. American plants are selling everything they can build, and they cannot make it fast enough. So put yourself in that boardroom. You're running a factory that's printing money. Demand is endless. The whole world is buying because you're the only one left who can sell. And some statistician walks in and says, "You should tear up the way you do everything." What do you say? You say, "Get out of my office." Why fix what is so obviously, gloriously not broken? That complacency, that fat, comfortable, we're number one and we always will be. That's the seed of everything that went wrong. Remember it, because you're going to watch it cost America the entire motorcycle industry. Deming was a prophet with no audience in his own country, so he took the idea to the one place on Earth desperate enough to actually use it. Japan, 1950. No steel, no tooling, no money. A country that had been bombed back 50 years. And the men running what was left of Japanese industry had figured out something with the kind of clarity you only get when you have no other option. Survival meant one thing and one thing only: become a nation that exports manufactured goods the rest of the world will choose to buy. Not cheap junk that falls apart, not knockoffs. Things so good that a man in Ohio, with every option in the world, picks the Japanese one on purpose. That was the only road out of the ash. And nothing on earth focuses the mind like having no other road. So in the summer of 1950, a group called the Union of Japanese Scientists and Engineers brought Deming to Tokyo. And about 450 Japanese engineers and senior managers, the men who actually ran the factories, sat down in a room and listened, hard, to the American that America wouldn't hear. He taught them to use data to hunt down the cause of a defect while the product was being built, instead of catching the broken ones at the end and throwing them in a bin. He taught them that quality wasn't an inspector at the end of the line. It was a responsibility baked into every single step of making the thing. And here's what stunned even Deming. They didn't just nod and adopt it. They took it further than he had. They built whole company philosophies on top of principles he'd only sketched. In 1960, the Prime Minister of Japan handed this American statistician a national honor, the Order of the Sacred Treasure, for helping rebuild their entire industry. A Japanese national medal for an American that America had ignored. And America still didn't get it. It took until the end of the 1970s, a TV documentary essentially asking why the Japanese were eating Detroit alive, before American executives went looking for this guru. And they found him exactly where he'd been the whole time. In Washington. Ignored. For 30 years. 30 years. That's the head start. 3 decades of a completely different way of thinking about what it means to build a machine. And every Japanese motorcycle company you can name, Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, Suzuki, grew up inside that culture, breathing it in, while America stood still. Now, before I show you how this turned into actual motorcycles, I want to give you the proof that this philosophy is real and not just talk, because it got tested. Under what's basically laboratory conditions. There was a car plant in Fremont, California. Under General Motors, it was the worst plant in the entire company. Garbage quality, drunk workers, fistfights on the assembly line, cars built with parts missing on purpose by guys who hated the place. GM shut it down in disgust. Then Toyota came in and reopened it as a joint venture and ran it the Japanese way. And here is the part that should stop you. Cold, they hired back the same workers, the same union, the exact same men who had built the worst cars in America. They did not bring in new people. They did not fire the troublemakers. Same hands, same building. and the defects fell off a cliff. Almost overnight, those same workers were building some of the highest quality vehicles in the country. Same building, same union, same people. The only thing that changed was the system around them. The workers were never the problem. The system was the problem. Deming was right, and an old GM plant in California proved it on the bodies of the very cars America had already given up on. That is the philosophy your Japanese motorcycle was built inside. And it comes down to 3 specific things. Let me make every one of them concrete. The first one the Japanese call jidoka. In plain English, any worker on the line could stop the entire line instantly the second they saw a defect. One person. A guy installing a bolt sees something wrong. He pulls the cord, the whole line stops, and it does not move again until somebody has found the root cause and fixed it. Now picture the old American line. The line was sacred. The line did not stop. If a part didn't seat right, the machine moved forward anyway, and they prayed an inspector caught it at the very end. Sometimes he did. Sometimes that defect rolled out the door, got bought by a guy, and stranded him on the side of a highway at night. One system treats a single defect as an emergency to be killed at the source. The other treats it as a statistic to sort at the end. Multiply that across millions of machines and decades, and that difference becomes the entire reputation of a country's motorcycles. The second thing they call Kaizen. Continuous improvement, but not as a program with a banner and a kickoff meeting and an end date. As a permanent habit, forever. The man installing the part suggests a slightly better way to install it. And management actually does it. A tiny improvement times millions of machines, times decades, compounds into something enormous. And before anyone tells me this is some mystical Japanese thing that can't travel, Honda's plant in Georgetown, Kentucky, staffed by American workers, runs on the exact same philosophy and takes in thousands of worker suggestions a year. It was never about the nationality of the worker. It was about the system the worker stands in. Same lesson as that California plant. Always the same lesson. The third thing is just in time. Parts arrive exactly when needed, in exactly the quantity needed. This one was born straight out of being broke. Post-war Japan couldn't afford giant warehouses full of spare parts. Sounds like an accounting trick. It's not. It's a quality weapon. Because if a supplier ships you a bad batch and you've got a warehouse, that bad batch hides in the warehouse for months before anyone notices. No warehouse? The bad batch reveals itself immediately. And a problem that shows up immediately gets fixed before it poisons 100,000 machines. 3 ideas. Stop the line. Improve forever. Catch problems instantly. That's most of the reason a 40-year-old Honda still fires on the first cold morning of the year. And that durability is exactly where this gets practical for you, because the same engineering that makes these engines last leaves fingerprints you can actually check before you hand over your money. The tells in a service history. The mileage marks that separate a bike that was babied inside its design limits from one that got beaten to death. The model years that are bulletproof, and the handful you should run away from. That section's Motorcycle Buyer's Bible, the full used Japanese inspection checklist, with the specific model-by-model picks across Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, and Suzuki sitting in Section 5. And the used market right now is priced lower than it's been in 15 years, which means this is the window. The link is in the description. It was $97. Right now, it's $9. Okay, philosophy gives you the why, But philosophy has to turn into metal, or it's just a nice story. So let's get into the actual machines. And the place to start is the companies themselves, because every one of these four was a gamble that should have failed. Take Yamaha. You know what Yamaha was before it built a single motorcycle? A piano company. Musical instruments. In the mid-1950s, a man named Junichi Kawakami looked at his instrument factory and bet the whole thing on building a motorcycle they had zero experience making. Their first bike was a little 125, a copy of a German design, sure, but built to a standard nobody expected from a piano maker. They called it the Red Dragonfly. And to prove it wasn't a fluke, Yamaha took it racing almost immediately and started winning. A piano company, winning races, in its first years of existence. That tells you everything about the culture these companies came out of. The assumption that if you're going to build a thing, you build it to win, or you don't build it. Why does everyone in Japan seem to do this? Here's a clue, and it comes from a Yamaha engineer who got asked, point blank, why Japan just builds better motorcycles than everyone else. His answer was almost offhand, and it's the most underrated explanation I have ever heard. He said, Japan has no real military-industrial complex, so the best engineering talent in the country doesn't go off to design weapon systems and missiles and defense contracts. It goes into racing and manufacturing. It goes into motorcycles. Sit with that. For 50 years, some of the sharpest engineering minds an entire nation produced pointed themselves at one problem. How do you build a machine that's reliable, lasts forever, and a normal working person can actually afford? Not a fighter jet, not a guidance system, a motorcycle. 50 years of a country's best brains aimed at one target. From the outside, that looks like magic. It is not magic. It is focus. Unbroken, generational focus. And that focus made very specific engineering choices. Let me give you the big three. Choice 1. Conservative timelines. The Honda CB engine family, the Yamaha twins. These platforms were refined across decades, not torn up and reinvented every single year for a flashier brochure. The basic architecture stays stable. Each new generation fixes the known weak points of the last one and builds on a proven foundation. And the payoff for you, the owner, is huge. Parts are everywhere. Every independent mechanic in the country already understands the platform, and the repair costs actually go down over time as the whole world gets familiar with the machine. Compare that to the European habit of reinventing everything constantly. You get a thrilling spec sheet and an orphaned motorcycle nobody can fix in 5 years. Choice 2. Generous tolerances. The Honda CG 125. This little engine runs in motorcycle taxi fleets across East Africa, getting daily, brutal, barely maintained abuse on terrible fuel for decades, and it refuses to quit. Why? Because it was designed with clearances and oil passages sized to tolerate exactly that. Variation in maintenance. A little contamination. Fuel that isn't lab perfect. It was engineered to survive the real world. Now compare that to a modern European sport engine running its main bearings at clearances of 0.005 of an inch. A single tiny metal particle that the Honda just circulates and shrugs off can destroy that precision engine before the next oil change. Both are real engineering choices, but only one of them is why we are sitting here talking about reliability. Choice 3. The racing connection is so big it needs its own section, and we'll get there. But first, the number people love to use to insult Honda. And it's the most beautiful own goal in this entire story. They say, sure, Honda sells 16 million units a year, but most of those are little scooters in India. They say it like it's a takedown. It is the strongest argument in Honda's favor. Think about what it takes to build a small commuter machine that a family in rural India depends on as their only transportation. It has to start in monsoon flooding. It has to start in brutal 110-degree heat. It has to run on fuel quality that swings all over the place, get maintained by whoever happens to be around, and never, ever leave that family stranded, because there is no second vehicle, no backup, no plan B. That is not lower-tier engineering. That is the single hardest real-world test environment that exists on the face of the earth. And Honda passes it millions of times a year. And here's the kicker. Everything Honda learns from those 16 million brutal machines, every failure, every weak point that shows up in the heat and the floods and the dust, flows straight back into the engineering of everything else they build, including the bike sitting on the showroom floor at your American dealer. That's the scale advantage nobody talks about, and the numbers make it almost unfair. Harley-Davidson builds around 180,000 motorcycles a year. Ducati, around 60,000. BMW's motorcycle division, around 200,000. Honda builds 16 million. Yamaha, around 5.5 million. The company building 60,000 bikes a year in one country for one kind of customer is not working with dumber engineers. It's working with a tiny fraction of the data. Honda's machines are out there failing and getting fixed and getting better across 6 continents simultaneously. Tokyo traffic, Indian villages, African backroads, Brazilian highways, American suburbs, Alpine passes, all at once, all feeding back into the next engine. Volume isn't just volume. Volume is information. And nobody else has anywhere near this much of it. Let me pause here, because if you're getting value out of this, if this is the kind of breakdown you wish more channels actually did the homework for, do me one favor and hit subscribe. That's it. It tells the algorithm to put this in front of more riders, and it's the only way this channel keeps making the long, sourced, no-nonsense stuff instead of the recycled garbage. Subscribe, and let's keep going, because now we get to the part where this stops being about factories and starts being about war. Racing war. Here's the question that cuts to the bone. If Japanese engineering is so disciplined and so conservative, how did they also become the most dominant force in motorcycle racing the sport has ever seen? Aren't those opposites, careful and reliable versus fast and ferocious? No. And understanding why they're not opposites is the whole secret. Go back to the very beginning of Japan's racing story, and it starts with a crime. A genuine Cold War espionage story most riders have never heard. In the early 1960s, the cutting edge of motorcycle performance was the two-stroke engine, and the people who understood two strokes best in the world were behind the Iron Curtain at a company in East Germany. Their lead engineer was a brilliant man named Ernst Degner. He understood the secrets of making a two-stroke produce monster power. And he wanted out of East Germany, so he defected. And he didn't come empty-handed. He carried the two-stroke knowledge, the expansion chamber theory, the porting secrets, the deep technical understanding, straight to the West, straight to Suzuki. That stolen, smuggled knowledge became the foundation of Japanese two-stroke racing dominance for the next 2 decades. It rewired the entire sport. Think about how that compounds. A single engineer's defection in the early 60s seeds a body of knowledge that Suzuki and Yamaha build on, refine, and weaponize for 20 years. That's the racing version of the same compounding we already saw on the factory floor. Knowledge, captured, then improved on relentlessly, forever. And Honda took the other path, the four-stroke path, to the same destination. Between 1959 and 1967, Honda won well over 100 Grand Prix races and a stack of world championships. And the crown jewel was a thing called the RC-166, a 250 cubic centimeter engine with 6 cylinders, each one tiny, that revved past 18,000 revolutions per minute. 18,000. A quarter-liter engine screaming at a pitch that sounded less like a motorcycle and more like a jet. It dominated. Now here's why racing and reliability are not opposites, why they're actually the same thing wearing two different jackets. A race engineer in the 1960s was being forced to solve problems that a street bike engineer never faced at that intensity. How do you pull maximum power out of a tiny engine and keep it alive for a whole race? How do you manage heat when the thing is screaming at full output for an hour straight? How do you build a valve train and bearings that survive conditions that would instantly vaporize ordinary parts? And the answers to those questions, the metallurgy, the oil system design, the bearing science, the valve geometry, those answers do not stay at the racetrack. They walk straight into the engine you can buy at a dealer. Watch the specific decision Honda made on the 1969 CB750, the bike that changed motorcycling forever, the first mass-produced four-cylinder with a front disc brake. They chose plain bearings instead of roller bearings. That choice gave up a little bit of peak RPM, but it bought a massive increase in reliability and longevity. And here's the thing. The only reason an engineer can make a calm, wise trade-off like that is that he has already lived at the absolute screaming limit of both kinds of bearing in the race program. He knows the entire envelope. He knows exactly how far he can back off to make it last forever on the street. Because he's been to the edge where it grenades. Racing didn't just make the bikes fast. Racing made the engineers wise. It gave them the knowledge to know precisely how much was safe to give away. And it never stopped. Yamaha has run its MotoGP program continuously, not mainly to sell bikes to racing fans, but to keep a live environment where the people designing your boring, reliable commuter bike are simultaneously solving problems at the bleeding edge of what's physically possible. Kawasaki built the H2R, a supercharged, track-only monster making over 300 horsepower, and the carbon fiber knowledge, the supercharger heat management, the high-strength steel from that program trickles down into machines that normal people ride to work. The Frontier feeds the showroom, constantly, for 60 straight years. That's the loop nobody outside Japan has been able to replicate. Race at the edge, learn what metal can really do, then pour that wisdom into a machine built to last decades. Speed and longevity from the exact same well of knowledge. Now, I have to warn you about something, because this is the one place where all that beautiful engineering runs straight into a cynical business decision, and it costs you money the day you ride off the lot. The tires. The tires fitted to your brand new Honda or Yamaha at the factory are very often a fleet compound that wears 30 to 50% faster than the retail version of that exact same tire, same name printed on the sidewall, completely different rubber underneath. So you've got a machine engineered to run 100,000 miles, and it ships from the factory on tires designed to be garbage in 6,000. That has nothing to do with the engineering culture and everything to do with the deal between the manufacturer and the tire company. It's all documented in Section 2 of the Buyer's Bible, the OEM tire scam laid out in full, plus exactly which tire to put on instead for every category of Japanese machine. same link in the description, was $97. Right now, $9. So let's get to the cold, hard data, because everything I've described, all this philosophy and racing and scale, should show up in actual numbers. And it does. In the industry-wide reliability surveys, year after year after year, the Japanese brands sit at the top. Honda and Yamaha out front on long-term reliability. Kawasaki and Suzuki right behind them. This is not one good year. This is decade after decade of the same result, the same order, the same gap. And look at what owners actually spend. Owners of the Japanese bikes tend to spend a few $100s a year on unexpected repairs. Owners of the premium European machines can spend 2 to 3 times that. Stretch it over 10 years and you're looking at thousands of dollars of difference, money baked right into the badge on the tank the moment you buy it. And the most honest people about all this? The riders of the other brands. There's an Italian rider from the country that builds some of the most beautiful, soul-stirring motorcycles ever made, who basically said it straight: none of them can beat Japanese quality. That the Japanese can forge metal in a way nobody else manages. And that if Italy could build engines like that, they'd charge $100,000 each. That is not a Honda fanboy talking. That's a man who loves Italian motorcycles, telling the painful truth about them. There's the guy who described watching his buddy's Italian engine weep oil onto the pavement from the saddle of his own Kawasaki, which just runs and runs and runs. There's the mechanic who worked the counter at both a Ducati shop and a BMW shop and watched a crankshaft split clean in two on a 2-year-old bike and watched a routine valve check eat 9 hours of labor on a newer model. 9 hours on a valve check. Now, and this matters, so hear me clearly. None of this means Italian or German or American motorcycles are bad. I'm not saying that. They made different trade-offs. Character, sound, soul. The way a thing makes your chest thump when you twist the throttle. A specific feeling. Those are real values, and real riders pay real premiums for them. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. The premium is honest, as long as you know what you're buying. You're buying a machine optimized for how it makes you feel, not for how many decades it'll start without complaint. Both of those are completely legitimate things to want from a motorcycle. They are just not the same thing. And the reliability data is only measuring one of them. But here's the bigger, stranger question. The one that should keep the executives at every other manufacturer up at night. If all of this is public, if Deming's principles are taught in every business school on the planet, if the words Kaizen and Jidoka are right there in the dictionary, if competitors have spent billions of dollars and decades trying to copy it, then why, after all this time, hasn't anybody caught Japan? Why are the Japanese brands still sitting at the top of the reliability charts, year after year, like nothing's changed? This is the exact question that baffled people studying Toyota for 40 years. And the answer is the same one. The tool that lets a worker stop the line is just a piece of rope. Kaizen is a word you can look up in 5 seconds. Any company on earth can install these tools in a matter of weeks. Buy the rope, print the posters, run the training seminar. Done. What you cannot install on any timeline, with any budget, with any consultant, is the culture that makes those tools mean something. Go back to that GM plant in California one more time, because it's the perfect proof. General Motors had total, complete access to the entire Toyota system for years through that joint venture. They rotated their managers through it. They sent delegations to Japan. They photographed and documented every single process. They had the whole playbook handed to them, and they could not reproduce it anywhere else in their company. They took those lessons back to other GM plants, and it didn't work. Because the thing that made it work was never the processes. It was the shared belief, top to bottom, every person in the building. That quality is not a department you fund. It's the way you make every single decision, all day, every day, by reflex. And you cannot transfer a reflex through a policy memo. The same exact thing is true in motorcycles. A European company can study Honda's methods down to the millimeter. They can implement every technique, and they still won't get Honda's result because what they're trying to copy was never a technique. It's the accumulated output of 70 years of an entire industrial culture pointing itself at one problem. The engineering pipeline running from the race program into the production line. The feedback loop that only 16 million units a year can create. The 30-year head start that began in a Tokyo lecture hall in 1950 with an American nobody at home would hear. You can't buy that. You can't copy it. You can't shortcut it. You can only spend 70 years building it. And they already did. Everyone else is starting the race 70 years behind, against a competitor that gets further ahead every single year. So now go all the way back to where we started. That broke 38-year-old man, standing in the ash of his factory in 1945, in a starving country, bolting little war surplus radio engines onto bicycle frames because it was the only thing he could afford to build. Look at what grew out of that. Driven by pure desperation. Built on the idea of an American statistician that America threw in the trash. Sharpened by 70 years of racing wars and stolen two-stroke secrets and screaming six-cylinder engines. Multiplied by a manufacturing scale no competitor on Earth has ever come close to touching. All of that, is what you are actually buying when you buy a Japanese motorcycle. You're not buying a lucky engine. You're not buying a unicorn. You are buying the end product of the single most relentless, longest-running, most disciplined pursuit of quality in the entire history of manufacturing. Which brings me back to that Honda in the Minnesota garage, with 200,000 miles on it, that its owner thinks is nothing special. He's right. It isn't special. It isn't a miracle. It isn't a freak. It is exactly, precisely what they built it to be. The expected, intended, engineered result of a promise that a man in the ashes made in 1945, and that an entire nation has kept, without breaking stride, for 70 years. And that's the difference. Everybody else built motorcycles. Japan kept a promise.